There is a version of you that existed before you became you, a version that breathed, cried, felt hunger, felt warmth, felt the cold shock of the world for the very first time, a version that looked into the eyes of the people who loved you most and felt something, something real, something overwhelming, and you remember absolutely none of it, not a single second. That person, that living, breathing, feeling human being, is gone from your memory, as completely as if they never existed. And the terrifying part is, they did exist. That was you, that crying infant in those photographs, the one being held, being rocked, being sung to in the middle of the night. That was your body, your heartbeat, your tears, but your mind has no record of them whatsoever. Think about that for a moment. Really sit with it. There is an entire chapter of your life, your first years on this earth, sealed behind a door you cannot open, in a room you cannot enter, in a language your adult brain no longer speaks. Scientists call it infantile amnesia, but that name is almost too clean, too clinical, for what it actually is. Because what it actually is one of the strangest, most unsettling, most philosophically dangerous facts about human existence. And almost nobody talks about what it truly means. So let's talk about it. The first thing you need to understand is that forgetting your infancy is not like forgetting where you put your keys. It's not like forgetting a name, or a dream, or what you had for lunch 3 Tuesdays ago. Those are memories that existed and faded. What happened to your earliest years is something far more fundamental, far more strange. Those memories were never formed the way adult memories are formed. Your brain, in those first years of life, was operating on completely different architecture. Imagine trying to save a file on a computer that hasn't finished being built yet. The hardware isn't ready, the software isn't installed, the storage system doesn't exist in the form it needs to exist in. That's what was happening inside your skull for the first 2 to 3 years of your life. The hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for converting experiences into long-term memories, for taking what just happened and writing it into your personal history, was still under construction. Neurons were still migrating. Neural pathways were still forming. The scaffolding of who you would eventually become was being erected, beam by beam. But the recording equipment hadn't been properly switched on yet. And here's what's strange. It wasn't just that you couldn't record memories the way adults do. It's that you were experiencing everything with an intensity that most adult humans will never feel again. Researchers who study infant cognition have found something that should genuinely unsettle you. Babies are not empty. They are not passive recipients of the world around them. They feel deeply, viscerally, completely. A baby feels hunger, not as an inconvenience, but as a full-body emergency. A baby feels warmth, not as comfort, but as a profound, total, all-consuming sensation of safety. A baby feels fear, not as a passing emotion, but as an annihilation, as if the universe itself is ending. Every single experience a baby has is experienced at maximum volume, with no filters, no context, no protective layer of language and logic to soften the edges. And you experienced all of that. You were that baby. Your nervous system was flooded, constantly, with the purest and most unmediated form of human experience possible. And then it was all erased. Not gently, not gradually, not in the way old memories soften and blur over decades. Erased with a kind of ruthless completeness that should feel, when you really think about it, like a kind of violence against your own story. But that's not what scientists discovered when they looked deeper. Because the story doesn't end with erasure. The story gets stranger, much stranger. In the 1980s and 90s, researchers began to discover something that completely reframed how we understand infant memory. They found that while babies cannot form the kind of memories we access with language and conscious recall, what scientists call explicit or declarative memory, they absolutely do form another kind of memory entirely: implicit memory, emotional memory, the memory of the body. This is memory that doesn't live in words or images or timelines. It lives in sensations, in reflexes, in the way certain smells make you feel safe without knowing why, in the way certain voices calm you instantly, in the way certain environments make you feel, beneath all rational explanation, like home. Your brain still remembers. It just remembers in a language you can no longer consciously read. Every time you felt hungry and were fed, your nervous system recorded that the world responds to your needs. Every time you cried and were held, your body learned that connection is real, that comfort exists, that you are not alone in the universe. Every time you were left to cry without answer, your system learned something else, something that may still be running quietly in the background of your adult relationships, shaping who you trust, how close you let people get, whether love feels safe or terrifying to you. The terrifying part is, you have no conscious access to any of this. You can't audit it. You can't review the footage. You can't sit down and examine the lessons your nervous system absorbed before you had a single word to describe what was happening to you. You are, in part, being run by a program you never got to read. There's a philosopher named Paul Ricoeur who spent much of his life thinking about narrative identity, the idea that we construct who we are through the stories we tell about ourselves, that the self is not a fixed thing, but an ongoing act of narration, a story we keep telling and retelling to make sense of our existence. But here's the problem. Here's where it gets dark. Every story has a beginning, and you don't have access to yours. The first chapter of your life is missing. The origin point of the narrative that became you is sealed away in a part of your brain that speaks no language you recognize. And so you spend your entire adult life constructing an identity, building a self, telling a story, with the first chapter torn out. You compensate, of course. You fill the gap with family photographs and stories told by parents, by siblings, by relatives who were there. You absorb their memories of you and wear them loosely as your own. But those are their memories, their perspectives, their version of events. They are not yours. You have never actually had access to your own beginning, and this is where everything changes. Because when you zoom out even further, when you step back from the neuroscience and the philosophy and look at this from the vast, cold distance of anthropology and evolutionary biology, you start to ask a different kind of question. Why? Why would evolution design a system like this? Why would the human brain be constructed in a way that guarantees we lose access to our earliest experiences? What possible advantage could there be in beginning life with such profound amnesia? And this is where the scientists start to disagree with each other in deeply interesting ways. One school of thought argues that infantile amnesia is simply a byproduct of rapid brain development. The hippocampus is growing so fast, producing new neurons at such an explosive rate, a process called neurogenesis, that new cells constantly disrupt the old storage patterns. Memory keeps getting overwritten by growth itself. The price of becoming is forgetting. The cost of building the brain is losing what the brain first experienced. But there's another theory, one that feels less like a mechanical explanation and more like something from the edge of philosophy. Some researchers believe that infantile amnesia serves a purpose, that forgetting is not a glitch in the system, it is the system, that the human brain may be deliberately, functionally designed to allow children to develop without the cognitive burden of conscious self-awareness pressing down on them too soon. That full, narrative memory, the kind that builds identity, the kind that creates the experience of being a self, moving through time, might actually be incompatible with the total openness that makes early learning possible. In other words, you had to forget in order to become. The version of you that experienced everything had to be let go, so that the version of you that understands things could exist. And then something even stranger happened when researchers looked at when exactly the memories start.